I've really been eating the same kind of breakfast foods for as long as I can remember, really the better part of 10 years. So I've got 9 or 10 foods that I always tend to rotate for breakfast. Now, I don't eat them all every day, but these are ones that are pretty much always in my diet in one way or another, whether I'm traveling or I'm at home. So just jumping right in, the first one is one you'd probably guess, and that's eggs. However, over the last few, months or so, I've really started to enjoy poached eggs. And the reason is just the versatility. I can poach them a little bit harder so they're a little bit easier on the go, or I can poach them really soft and have it so that I can put it over some veggies, put it over some asparagus. If I'm feeling really crazy and really frisky, I could put it over some like keto or gluten-free toast, right? The thing is just versatility, and when it comes down to the choline, when it comes down to the vitamin profile, when it comes down to the beta carotene, when it comes down to the B vitamins, it just doesn't match up with anything else. Like, it is the best, it is in a league of its own, and that's why almost every single day, I could probably pinpoint some days when I'm on the road that I don't have eggs, but just about every single day, they are a part of my life. Whether it's one egg just to get some nutrients, or I'm really using it as the primary source of protein and I have 5 or 6 of them. They are part of my life. Now, the next one is one that may come as a little bit of a surprise because it's something that I didn't used to eat a ton of before, but that's because before the brands that existed were just not that clean, and that's cottage cheese. Now, I was not a big fan of dairy like 7 or 8 years ago. I think I even did some videos talking about how, the inflammatory effects of dairy probably just weren't worth the risk to me. But now that there's higher quality dairy options available, we have to be real. Okay, and this isn't a plug for any kind of product, it's really not. But the bottom line is cottage cheese, especially if you get a higher fat form of cottage cheese, that is a nice form of conjugated linoleic acid. It's a slow digesting protein, it's exceptionally satiating, and it's exceptionally portable and versatile. So I can add fruit to it, I could add nuts to it, I can literally add oil to it. I don't know if you've ever done that. If you just need to get some different fats in, it actually tastes kind of good, even though it sounds entirely insane. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is just adding some macadamia nut butter or anything like that to cottage cheese is a quick way to get your caloric needs in for the morning in a super portable fashion. This next one is funny, and my wife always makes fun of me for it because one of my go-to real quick mix-up breakfasts, beef and berries. Ground beef and berries. Sounds totally weird, but it's delicious. You take just regular lean ground beef, cook it up with maybe some more breakfast type seasonings. So maybe oregano, maybe a little bit of thyme, maybe something that's got those Italian spices so it tastes a little bit more like breakfast sausage, and then put it in a bowl with some berries. It's not rocket science, but it's one of the most mineral dense and nutrient dense breakfasts that you could literally eat. The thing I like about ground beef too is that ground beef still has the gristle, still has some of that collagen in it, still has some of the components that we would otherwise throw out with these perfect supreme cuts, right? We're always looking for choice cuts. What's natural about that? I'm not gonna go find an animal that I hunted and try to break down every little perfect cut. I'm just gonna eat what I can eat. So that's what I like about ground beef. It's easy, it's digestible, and I get the whole thing. Now, this one is one that I have sparingly. So full disclaimer, personally, I'm not a big carbohydrate guy in the morning. I prefer to have protein and fats and keep it pretty lean in the morning anyway. Protein's usually my go-to. But there are situations where I will bring carbohydrates in, but I hardly ever do high glycemic carbohydrates. So this number 4 breakfast item is something called overnight oats. Now, hear me out on this. I'm not a big oats guy. I usually opt for fruit as my source of carbohydrates 9 times out of 10. Otherwise, it's going to be something like lentils. But the thing with overnight oats is since you're cooking them in a cool fashion, soaking them overnight, they remain a resistant starch. And what that means is that when you consume them, they're exceptionally satiating and exceptionally low glycemic. So if you just take some oats, add water to them, put them in the fridge, and literally let them cook overnight by soaking, then you could add some stevia, you could add some monk fruit, some vanilla extract, a little bit of fruit. You have a very low glycemic way to get some carbohydrates in, but also a delicious way to get a bunch of soluble fiber, which has interesting effects on satiety and GLP-1 throughout the course of the day. So if you're trepidatious about oatmeal, and honestly, I might get destroyed for saying this, somewhat rightfully so, because a lot of times if you cook up oatmeal, instant oats, that's gonna be a pretty big glycemic load and spike. So I understand the hesitation there. But overnight oats does kind of change the game. But try to opt for organic overnight oats so you're not getting a bunch of glyphosate, you're not getting that GMO garbage. I say that loosely, but reality is there's a lot of glyphosate in oats, and if you get organic, you can just avoid that, plain and simple. Now this next one is one if I'm fasting, but also one that I use regardless. A breakfast staple for me is usually electrolytes. You start your day in a dehydrated sense, and a lot of us neglect the hydration aspect. And what happens is we drink a little bit of water in the morning, and then we increase our water intake as the day goes on. And next thing you know, you're drinking too much water at night, and you're waking up in the middle of the night to pee, disrupting your slow wave sleep and throwing everything off kilter. It should be the opposite. Start your day with large boluses of water and electrolytes, so you hyperload, and then you trickle down as the day goes on. It's a much better way to hydrate, and it's a lot more sustainable. So I start my day by usually drinking about a quart of water, and then I'll usually do a half a packet of Element electrolytes just to start. And then I'll have the other half during my workout. So I'm working out in the morning, so I'll usually have a full Element packet between the time I wake up and the time my workout is finished. And I try to dose it accordingly. Now, if I were to jump right into a workout and start sweating a bunch, I might pound an entire packet. So that's 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. I also put a link down below if you want to try them out. There's a free variety pack that you get whenever you place an order with Elements. So any purchase gets you a free variety pack of all their different flavors. So you can get a sample pack so you can try out their lemon lime, you can try out their citrus, you can try out their mango chili, you can try out their chocolate salt, you can try these different flavors, see which one is best for you, or you can just give them to a friend or whatever. So that link is down below. It's drinklmnt.com/Thomas. And this isn't if you're just fasting, okay? This is definitely if you're eating too. We need to mineralize and hyperhydrate in the morning and trickle off as the day goes on. So again, that link is down below. drinklmnt.com/Thomas gets you that variety pack. Next one is super wild. People think baked potatoes are like these super high carb, crazy things. And candidly, they are, but there's also a huge difference between a potato that's 3 ounces and a giant russet potato that you're getting at Paul Martin's Steakhouse that's gonna be, I don't know, 10 ounces, 12 ounces. I mean, do the math, there's a big difference. So if I ever have a potato with breakfast, it's going to be A, alongside protein, B, generally it's been heated and then cooled, so it becomes a retrograded starch, because I like having those low glycemic carbs in the morning. And on the off chance that I have a piping hot potato, there's nothing else on it. So a potato, when you heat it, is going to become high glycemic because the starch chains, the glucose chains, molecules that are in a starch chain, when you heat them, they separate and it becomes high glycemic. So if you do have this sort of meal, like you have a baked potato with breakfast, which sounds like a dinner item, but it makes more sense with breakfast, you want to make sure that you're combining it with some protein so it's lowering that glycemic spike. Okay. Now the interesting thing is, like, you're talking a food that's pretty darn simple and clean. You don't have to deal with grains. You really don't have to deal with any other issues in the fact that it's higher carbohydrate and it's a starch, but at least it's easy to assimilate. So I just encourage people to go for like a baked potato that doesn't have oil, that's just either microwaved if you want to microwave it, or literally bake it the night before and bake a bunch of them and put them in the fridge. You don't have any of the stuff that you would get from hash browns where you have a bunch of oil added to them, a bunch of other stuff. You're not looking at cereals, you're not looking at toast, you're looking at a pretty clean, unadulterated carb. So let's not bag on potatoes, guys. Like, they could be perfectly useful. This next one is one when I'm on the go. And it's interesting because recently, when I talk about this on Instagram, I catch a lot of flack. Like, people do not seem to process the fact, no pun intended, that cold cuts do not have to be garbage processed meat. Just for clarity here, if I were to take some tomatoes and throw them in a food processor, they would become a processed food. Just because something has been processed does not mean that it is a hyper palatable processed food. The difference between something that has been processed, like let's say meat that has been cut into thin slices and then has had salt added to it, and maybe some rosemary as a quote unquote preservative, technically that's processed. So are you never gonna eat it because it's processed? Would you never eat meat that's been salted and then air dried because it's processed? It's the same kind of thing. So when you opt for deli meat, you just wanna look at a couple things. Is there too much sodium in it? I usually try to opt for one that's gonna be about less than 400 milligrams per serving. Okay, I don't wanna go overboard. I usually opt for one that has no more than 4 ingredients. And I usually opt for ones that don't have like sodium phosphate in it, don't have added nitrites or nitrates that aren't from, say, celery, because that's gonna be a naturally occurring one. So just look for like Applegate Farms, look for Dietz and Watson, look for certain kinds of boar's head, and it's almost just as good as any chicken breast you're gonna cook up. So you can eat it straight up cold, or you can cut it up and throw it in a skillet with a little bit of olive oil, and it becomes like a breakfast ham. Trust me, give it a shot. It's cheap, it's quick, and it's super portable. Next up is one that I have to throw in here, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, and that's flat out blueberries. I go through blueberries like they are going out of style. Okay, I grab them by the handful, I shove them in my mouth, and I barely chew them. On to the next. Next one is going to be Greek yogurt with acai. Acai is a super, super low sugar anthocyanin rich berry that gets, again, thrown under the bus because we see acai bowls, which are loaded with added sugar, loaded with granola, loaded with sugar-laden yogurt. Like, it's garbage. That stuff is junk. Acai is not bad. Acai is one of the lowest carbohydrate fruits or purees that you could get. And if you get those frozen packets of unsweetened acai, you're not even going to want to eat the packet straight up. It has practically no taste. It's like pure polyphenols, pure antioxidants, pure anthocyanins with very little flavor. But if you mix that sucker into some yogurt, it does add a nice texture to it, and you're getting protein in a low carb sense, along with all the benefits of a polyphenol rich fruit. The next one is a little bit more of a recipe, but you could do it however. We're all into skillets and hashes most of the time. Like, they taste good, right? Like, let's not lie. Like, if you want to go to Denny's and you want to have a skillet, like, I know it's not the best stuff, but it tastes pretty good. How do you do that at home? What I'll do is I'll cube sweet potatoes, or I'll buy sweet potatoes that are already in small cubes, make my own hash with ground chicken, sweet potato, peppers, like hot peppers or bell peppers or whatever you want to do, salt, pepper. It's that simple. A little bit of olive oil and you skillet it up. You don't need to add anything crazy, and you've got a low glycemic, high resistant starch carbohydrate, along with a lean ground chicken, along with all kinds of antioxidants and flavonoids that you're getting from peppers and whatever other veggies you want to add to the mix. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.